How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the Patriot DIY channel. In this video, I'm going to be turning this boring empty wall space into a beautiful in-the-wall display gun cabinet. Alright guys, now I remember when my house was built that there just happens to be about a 2 foot by 2 foot empty space behind this wall right here. And for a while now, I've been thinking about how to best utilize that space. So in this video, I'm going to be cutting a giant hole into this wall, and then I'm going to build an inset glass front display case. Now, a display case like we're going to build could be used for anything you want to put on display. I am a collector of antique firearms, so my display case is going to be used as a gun cabinet. I'm going to walk you guys through the whole process, cutting the hole in the wall, reinforcing it, and then building the cabinet and installing it. But first, guys, if you haven't done it yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, hit that notification bell, and give us a thumbs up. Now let's get to work. First, I need to cut down my plywood. For this project, I'm going to be using a red oak plywood, and I'm going to cut it down to rough dimension with the track saw, and then take it over to the table saw to rip it down to its final width. For my face frames and door pieces, I'm going to be using some 1x4 oak, and I'm going to cut those down to length over at the miter saw. And then back over to the table saw to rip them down to width. Now I'm going to be making a glass door for this, so I need to cut a groove into each of my door components to accept that glass panel. The way I do that is I set the saw blade to the correct depth, then I center it on the board and run it through, cutting that groove. Then I'll flip the board the other way and run it through again, then test fit it with a piece of my glass to make sure it slides in easily. And I'll adjust the fence accordingly until I have the right size groove. Next, I need to cut the tenons for my door assembly. To do this, I'm going to set the saw blade so it sits just below that groove that we cut previously, and then I set a spacer block so I can cross cut at 3/8 of an inch from the edge of the board, and I use my miter gauge to push this through the blade, slowly working my way out to create this tenon that we're going to use for joining our door components. I'm going to assemble my face frame using pocket holes. So I'm going to drill pocket holes into each end of the top and bottom pieces for my face frame. Since the main part of our cabinet is going to be inside the wall and not visible, I'm also going to use pocket holes to assemble that. I'm also going to be attaching my face frame using pocket holes. So I need pocket holes on 3 edges of my top and bottom pieces, the 2 long edges of my back panel, and then along the front edge of my side panels. This will make more sense to you in a minute. With all my pocket holes drilled, I'm going to start assembling my face frame. So I lay out all the components on the workbench and fasten them together with glue and 1 1/4" pocket hole screws. Once it's assembled, I'm going to flip it over and use my router to put this nice looking profile on the edges. Next, I'm going to fit my door components together just temporarily so I can add that same edge profile to it as well. Now I'm going to turn my attention to the gun rack part itself. So I'm going to mark out the spacing where each of the guns is going to rest. Once you've decided on the spacing, you can use a hole saw or Forstner bit to drill out each of those locations. I'm using a 2-inch hole saw bit for this. Off camera, I trimmed off some of the excess. Then I'm going to extend a line out from the edge of each of those holes and then cut along those lines over at the bandsaw, creating a nice place for each of the guns to sit. I'm just going to clean that up a little over at the spindle sander and use an 1/8 inch roundover bit to soften those edges. Now that I have all my components cut and prepped, I'm going to go back and give everything a good sanding with 120 grit sandpaper. I think it's going to be easiest to pre-stain each of these components, so I'm going to go ahead and stain each piece individually with this walnut colored gel stain. I'm going to go with a shellac finish for this, and I have brushed shellac on in the past, but for this project I'm going to try rubbing it on with an applicator. I think the shellac gives these pieces a really nice look, and it dries very quickly, so you can apply multiple coats in one day. But the trick with shellac is once you lay it down, you don't want to work back over it too much because it can get sticky while it's drying. I apply 3 coats of shellac and then go back and lightly sand each piece with 320 grit sandpaper before going back and applying 1 more coat of shellac. And once that shellac has cured well, I'm also going to buff in a light coat of paste wax just to give it a little extra protection and a nice satin sheen. Now with everything stained, I'm ready for assembly. I'm going to lay out the cabinet box components here on the workbench, clamp them in place, and fasten them together with glue and pocket hole screws. And I'll follow that process to attach both sides, top and bottom of the box. With the cabinet box face down on the workbench, I'm going to add some spacers here to hold my back panel in place while I get it attached. So I'm going to drop in that back panel, clamp it in place, and fasten it to the sides through those pocket holes that we drilled earlier. Alright, some of you probably have already spotted my mistake right here. These pocket holes in the side panels are supposed to be for attaching the face frame, but as you can see, I have this one turned the wrong way. Luckily, none of this is going to be seen once the cabinet is installed, so I'll just drill some new pocket holes on this side and we should be able to get back to work. Now I'm going to flip the cabinet over and attach my face frame. So I'm going to lay that in place and make sure that I have an even overlay all the way around, and then fasten it to the box through those pocket holes that we drilled in the sides earlier. Now the main part of my cabinet is complete and it's really starting to look like something. Alright guys, now with most of my assembly complete, I'm ready to cut the glass for our door. Now for this, you can certainly use regular glass, tempered glass. You could go with a plexiglass, but for this application, I wanted to use something a little stronger. So what I have here is a sheet of polycarbonate. This is crystal clear, just like glass, but it is supposed to be 250 times stronger than tempered glass. I'm going to be showing you 2 different ways to cut this polycarbonate. First is just by running it through on the table saw. Now it is recommended that you use a blade with a high tooth count for this. The other way you can cut this is just with a plastic cutting knife designed for cutting plexiglass. You just need to clamp down a straight edge and run your blade across it several times, then slide that cut mark to the edge of your table and bend it until it breaks. Now I'm ready to start assembling my door. So I'll start by adding a little glue to those tenons on the top and bottom of our door, and then I'll fit that into place and clamp it together while that glue dries. Before attaching the other end of the door, I'm going to go ahead and slide that glass in, making sure it fits all the way into those grooves that we cut earlier. Then I can take it back over to the workbench and attach the other end of the door the same way we did the first. Then I just clamp it up and wait for that glue to cure. I'm going to be using concealed hinges for my door hardware. So I'm going to use the Craig hinge jig to help cut the mortise for that. Then just drop those hinges in and fasten them by hand. I'm also going to be adding a couple cam locks to these doors, so I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill the holes for those locks as well. Then I'm ready to put my door in place and temporarily attach it to the cabinet. Before I install the gun rest, I'm going to apply some of this sticky back felt to the front face of it to help protect the guns from getting scratched up. I will have a link to this felt along with everything else in the description below. Then I just need to mark out the location for the gun rest. I'm going with 34 inches on mine. Then I drill some pilot holes along that mark, apply a little wood glue to the back of the gun rest, and set it down into place. Once that glue's had time to dry, I'm going to flip the cabinet over and secure it from the back with wood screws. Alright guys, now that we know the exact dimensions of the cabinet, now is the scary part. We're going to cut the hole. So let's get to work marking out the location of our cabinet and then get to cutting. First I'm going to mark the location of any studs that may be in my way, and then very carefully measure and mark the exact location for my hole. Then I just push the saw in through the sheetrock and start cutting. And I'm going to make sure I cut just outside of my line so I don't have any trouble fitting this cabinet into place later. Well guys, there's no turning back now. Now this stud here is not load bearing, so I'm just going to cut that out of the way with my reciprocating saw. Then I'll begin adding in some support pieces to attach my cabinet to later. And I want that cabinet to have a light in it. Now luckily there is an outlet right here underneath where I'm putting this cabinet. And so it's going to be pretty simple to just wire off of this outlet for our new light and also have a switch for it as well. Now I think what's going to be the easiest way to do this is replace our outlet here with an outlet switch combo. That way we don't have to cut in a new switch box here somewhere. We can use the existing power box that's already here. So let's get this wired up. Now you want to make sure you cut the power to this location before you begin working. And I'm not an electrician, so I'm not going to go step by step on how to install this new switch, but it is a pretty simple process. And if you're not comfortable doing this kind of thing, you definitely want to consult an electrician. Alright, now that's a tight spot, so I wasn't able to film everything, but let me show you what I got going on here. Basically just wanted to add some extra support for our cabinet. Now this stud that was right here was not structural, so there was nothing extra I needed to do there. But I did go ahead and add a couple of boards down here on either side of it just to help support that cabinet. I also added one going across here that's going to support the back part of the cabinet. And then I furred out these 2x4 so it meets right to the edge of our hole where the cabinet's going to go. And that's what I'm actually going to screw through the cabinet into these new studs here. Also got our power wired in here, and you can see I just routed that wire up for us to run into the top of the cabinet for our light. Alright guys, we are finally finished with the cabinet and we're almost ready to put it in the wall, but first I'm going to run my wire down in through the top and get the light installed, and then we'll get this thing mounted up in the wall. I'm just going to push that wire in through a hole I drilled in the top of the cabinet and get this light wired up. It works. Now let's get the light mounted and we'll put this cabinet up in the wall. Alright guys, this is the moment of truth. Only thing left to do now is put it up in the hole and cross our fingers and hope it fits. So I just slide the cabinet into place and it fits perfectly. To secure the cabinet to those studs in the wall, I'm going to drill a larger recessed hole about halfway through the cabinet side, then secure it with a wood screw and cover up the hole with these little hole caps. Then I can reattach the door and install those cam locks. Alright guys, we are finished with our in-the-wall display gun cabinet, and man, I could not be happier with the way this thing turned out. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. If you guys are looking to build something similar, I hope the video helped you out. Don't forget guys, as always, I will have links to all the tools I used for this build, as well as all the hardware and different products that we use for this project. Those are all going to be linked in the description below if you want to get those for yourself. Now, obviously, something like this is not going to be maximum security. Its purpose is for display, not necessarily for locking the guns up. But we do have some security. We have the polycarbonate glass, we have double locks on the door, and we do have the steel security cable at the bottom. But ultimately, something like this is just for looks. It's for display. And as far as that goes, I think it turned out great. I love the look of this oak wood. The interior lighting is perfect on it, and I just cannot wait to fill this thing up. So let's go ahead and do that now. Thanks for watching guys. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.